So for those of you that don't know, my name is Jason Corey. I run our application integration, application platforms, and application modernization business for Federal. So all of the specialists out there working with different clients are on our team. From a product perspective, that includes all the JBoss middleware technology, OpenShift, the container platform, and then our mobile technologies. So I'm excited to moderate today's panel. We've got a great group for you. We also have probably one of the most overhyped topics in IT today, being DevOps. So what we're going to try and do today is really give you some real-life stories about how some of these technologies are being implemented. And then on some of the prep calls, I told the panel, we want to give you some ideas that if you are interested in potentially starting to employ some DevOps practices, what are some key takeaways you could come out of this session with. So with that said, we'll go real quick in introductions. Maybe we'll start with Dominic and work our way back down that way.
Hi, my name is Dominic Delmolino, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Accenture Federal Services. In my role at Accenture, I serve as kind of our global oversight for DevOps implementations at many federal agencies, and we focus a lot on an enterprise capability there and how to introduce DevOps more broadly across an organization, so we run into a lot of legacy issues all the time.
Keith McCloskey. Is it on? Number 3. Keith McCloskey. I can talk really loud. Keith McCloskey with Blackstone Technology Group. I'm also a CTO. My role is a bit similar. We're a smaller organization, but we really focus on a couple of key areas: cloud, cybersecurity, lean agile, and DevOps. And for us, DevOps is kind of the culmination of what we've been trying to do with cloud, what we've been trying to do from a cybersecurity standpoint, and quite honestly, the evolution of agile. But it's really the principles of applying lean thinking, systems thinking, to solving problems and getting products out the door much more effectively with a high degree of fidelity, quality, and security. So excited to be on this panel. A lot of great talent.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Hoover. I work for Customs and Border Protection. I'm a project manager, and I run our standardized development environment and am helping to lead the way in DevOps in our organization with a lot of other great people. And I've been with CBP for about 6 years and running our environment for 3 years.
Hi, everyone. My name is Diana Andrews. I'm the Assistant Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Software Engineering within the Social Security Administration. And we just had a recent reorganization last November. As a part of that, I went from leading 300 people to almost 1,200. And it's the software engineers, so taking ourselves to a higher plateau of being just developers to being engineers who are innovative, being creative, and having the power to be able to implement change.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rick Stewart. I'm a middleware solutions architect for DLT Solutions. I've been in the IT industry for over 30 years now, and I don't say that as part of telling my age, but I probably played every role within a enterprise system, from tester to individual performer, developer. I've worked in operations, et cetera. And I have a unique opportunity to talk to customers in the federal space to see how they want to move from a better development process, get it into production with as little errors as possible, high quality software. And I believe as part of my history, I have worked in a startup where it was almost essential to work with all these different hats. And we were doing DevOps before it was cool, it just wasn't called DevOps. It was, hey, wear a hat and get the job done and understand perspectives of each group.
So as I mentioned, DevOps is by far one of the most overhyped terms you'll hear in industry today. And I like to follow it up typically with my favorite question I'll ask the different clients when we go out on site, which is, what exactly do you mean by that? So we're going to start going down the line of panelists just to really understand when the term DevOps is thrown out, what does it really mean inside their organization? And more importantly, what are some of the problems you're trying to solve when using DevOps principles? Dominic, go ahead and start with you.
Sure, I'll start. What we try to say when we talk to agencies about going forward with a DevOps program is it's about enabling both developers and operations professionals to be more efficient and more effective at their jobs. In many ways, it's about providing them with systems and tools as if they were end users, and we want them to accomplish their mission, which is making IT more efficient, more effective for the ultimate goal of the agency. And so some of that really is about interacting with those individuals, bringing them together. DevOps is a lot about that cultural interaction between development and operations. And so how do we begin that process of assessing their needs for tooling, for processes that help them be more effective for the mission?
To expand on that, certainly we look at it in a very similar way. It's really about creating value through more streamlined flow, getting things out the door much more efficiently, much more effectively, like I said earlier, with a high degree of fidelity around quality and knowing the security posture. But for us, what we look at, we take more of a humanistic approach to DevOps. What we have found is that we spend a tremendous amount of time educating and truly understanding where folks are. And we look at the technology as a way to codify their needs in the technology. Give them the visibility that they need throughout that life cycle, throughout that flow, so they know with high fidelity that they're getting what they need. Security has visibility into all the things that are going on across that DevOps pipeline, that the quality assurance folks have visibility into the testing that's being done. So not only do they have that visibility across the entire pipeline, but we also seek to push them much further up in the process so their needs can be understood well in advance. And again, part of what we do is education. So we try to find the right lexicon, a common understanding of the terms and the methods and the things that people need. We spend a lot of time really trying to sit down with folks and understand where they are. We understand the government has a tremendous amount of bureaucracy. There's processes and policies that cause those things and laws. But there's always a reason behind those things. And we try to get to that root cause. What's the reason for that process or those delays that exist? And let's figure out how to solve that, reducing those points of friction.
In my agency, DevOps is right now still a very exciting buzzword, and there's a lot of confusion about what the definition of DevOps is. So we've got some teams that are very mature and using a lot of continuous integration and continuous delivery, a lot of automation, automated testing, and are using all great processes in automation that are going to lead up to an eventual ability to deliver right into production in the long term. However, there's also a lot of teams out there that are not as mature and still working toward just sort of basic automated testing. So we're trying to help define what DevOps is, using a standardized lexicon and working with DHS to help define that for all of our components with an integrated project team that I'm a chair on. So we're trying to define that for everyone and use standardized tools to help use that common functionality as well, so that way everyone knows what each other's talking about. So that's our biggest thing, and for our agency, what we do can be literally life or death for our Border Patrol agents, and you did get to see when Mr. Hermes was up here, the video of what we do is so exciting, and it's bringing the mission, bringing IT to the mission, and making sure that we're providing the services out of IT into the Border Patrol agents and our field operations officers to make sure that they have what they need on a daily basis to keep our country safe.
You know, and listening to each one of these guys, I'm thinking, oh, they're building on what I want to say. This last part, what Jenn was saying about the mission, and so for Social Security Administration is, regardless of which area we're in, I'm in IT, it's all about how we are there to support our mission, and our mission being able to provide the American public what they need when they need it. So we are a cog in being able to provide that as far as doing that for our agency. And so for us, DevOps is what can we do on the IT side to be able to be more efficient to get that value, that need to our first-hand people in the field offices to be able to help the American public. And our life cycle for IT has been longer than it should be to be able to get those tools and that business value to those folks on the front line in our field office operations to the American public. We are also new as far as what for DevOps and what we're doing. We actually started with Agile, And Agile, we actually only introduced that within 2014 within our agency. We've had 8 projects that have gone through the Agile life cycle with the sprints, and we had brought in these training and Scrum Masters and co-location, all the things that you need to do for Agile. And then we realized, we need to add some tools into this to make this a little bit more efficient, and that's when we created our modern development environment. And so we were focusing on the dev part of DevOps, and building out all the tools that helps us to be able to help with orchestration, Jenkins to move us through the process, and following test-driven development and business needs and all of that. So 2015 is when we introduced the dev side and ending those tools in. Now we're in 2016, and where we are is we have implemented our first dev of the DevOps part of DevOps. So we use the tools that be able to do the development and get us through for one project in the summer of this year. We are still working through what we need to do to be able to get through the operation side of it in a more DevOps environment. So I see this that we're starting a race and we're like in the first few miles of it, but we're going to finish this race.
Thank you. My perspective on DevOps is taking a more holistic view of a system and not just looking at it from a development perspective. Can I create the best software that I can? Well, you can test it and unit test it and make it high quality, but when it meets the end user, will it fall over if there are a lot of end users? Is it resilient? Is it scalable? Can you add and make changes quickly to your application? That's all about what DevOps is. It's the Venn diagram of the intersection between people, processes, and technology. And while automation can't solve all problems, you can use automation to facilitate discussions between groups in order to overcome their constraints and their fears in order to make a more collaborative team.
Yeah, and I think the one thing we can all agree on, there's no definition of DevOps, right? It's really, DevOps is a goal in a lot of senses, it's a philosophy, but I think each of you did mention that culture is a big part of it, right? I mean, taking development teams, security teams, operations teams, getting them to work together. So just to dive into that from a practical sense, I know, Diana, you said you went from having 300 employees now 1,200-ish. I know you mentioned that there were training programs that you were putting some of your team through. So can you expand on that a little bit? Because I think the skills gap was something that was brought up in the general session, and it's a real challenge for the agencies out there.
Yeah, so for this fiscal year, I think it was cross government, we had challenges as far as our budget. So we had limited hiring that we could do. But the decision was made by our Chief Information Officer that everyone that I hired in my organization, the Office of Software Engineering, they were all going to be taught to work in a modern environment. That we were going to get them in some immersive training, developers boot camp. We went out and researched various avenues, various venues that are available. We found a 12-week boot camp, and it was immersive. And we had 5 different offerings of that, and the last class is graduating on Election Day. But it's been wonderful. I mean, I've had people, and my team, my executive team, my management team has been excellent in providing support for these guys throughout, so they're feeling they're not alone. I use a lot of analogies when I do presentations, speak to folks, and I was telling them if anybody watched The Officer and Gentleman and Lou Gossett Jr. and Richard Gere and something like that, but it was tough, but it was also that you had the support of your peers in the class and the management team back at headquarters. So the thing that we're doing that now that they're graduating is they're being put on efforts where they're going to modernize. We've created a whole modern architectures. So there's the 12 factors. We're going beyond that. We actually created 16 factors that they will follow. We're using things such as the API and microservices to be able to, just things that we can do to start pulling things together. The other thing that we've done, and I've said this to a few people, some of you here today, is that when we did this training, we have these guys all, ramped up to want to come and do this. The worst thing we could do is the leadership be in their way. The leadership doesn't get it. It says, what are you doing? Why are you trying something new? And so the leadership and not just the IT side, because we partner with the business and policy and other components within the agency, created this training called One Leadership, One Voice, to understand what it means to lead a modern development team. So we won't be in their way when they come back. And I also, even for those who have been around the agency for a while and say, does she really mean this? Because we tried this before and this didn't work. That I have actually created get out of jail free cards. And so that if you try it small and incrementally, and if you fail, it's okay. And just give me one of those get out of jail free cards back and all will be forgiven.
We need to get some of those get out of jail free cards too, Paul. I need to get that on the agenda. No, that's great, Diana. Thank you for that. And then Jennifer, I know during the prep calls we talked about the development environment that you have in place at CBP, and just again tying the culture aspect back to DevOps. Has having a common development environment available been useful in the agency, and what are some observations you've made there?
Sure. I think having a common development environment, a standardized development environment, has worked two ways. First, our assistant commissioner in late 2014 said, everybody will use Git. Everybody will do it, start moving. And so we had this big transition over from Subversion or from their desktops over to Git, and that has really helped with culture, because he also said that every single repository in our Git account will be read-only. So he said we all have the same clearance, we all are intelligent people, and we're not going to go sharing it, and it's all on-prem, so there's no reason that it can't be read-only. So that was one of the things pretty early on that our assistant commissioner did that I think has made a difference with culture, in that kind of culture of sharing and people being able to take a look at other things that other program directorates are doing that they hadn't been able to see before. We also have the same tool set, just tools that we have that everybody's using. A lot of them are open to read only, so that way the different teams can see what other teams are doing. And we've also started using those tools to host brown bags and various learning sessions, so that one of our directorates that are not as far along in their CI/CD process, that they can come back and learn from a different directorate that is further along. So they've kind of created this culture of sharing through our standardized development environment. And I think it's really become beneficial, and we plan to expand on that. And my coworker and I are standing up a working group and hopefully a center of excellence where we can make it even bigger, understand the other tools that are needed, and have further brown bags and lightning talks and other opportunities to learn and move further along in all of the directorates.
So I think it's safe to say common theme so far would be strong leadership. I heard a few people mention that, really managing the cultural side of it. I think encouraging innovation with different types of tools, like in common development environments. And then one other thing that I think is really a byproduct of the DevOps movement is just forced collaboration, right? So you're forcing groups that have traditionally worked in their own silos to get in a room and predefine some common types of technologies and tools. For us in the government, I would say security being integrated into that process up front is paramount. So Keith, I know security was an area that you've done a lot of work in, working with some of your clients. Can you expand on how security has been real critical within DevOps?
Absolutely. So when you think about the typical things that delay a release, security is usually the number one thing that delays things, and then possibly the operations teams. So DevOps was an attempt to bring ops and dev together, but we were still missing a critical aspect, which was security. I've been connected to security most of my career, 20 plus years, and it was always frustrating for me to think that these security folks were getting the raw end of the deal and not being brought in early enough. So the things that we've tried to do with our customers is get security involved early on. And we do that through a number of things. You talked about some of the training, brown bags. We do these lunch and learns. We have slide decks that kind of present the things that ISSOs, compliance professionals, are responsible for, so that developers and engineers and operations folks can understand. And then we try to educate the security folks on some of the constraints that developers have and engineers have. And it starts to break down some of the barriers so people understand each other. Building that common lexicon so people can communicate is one of the key things that we focus on. But what we've also discovered over the last several years is there's a lot of open source solutions and information sources, OWASP, the top 10 security issues, There's Safe Code provides a lot of really good information to build user stories, so you don't have to start from scratch. Building user stories when you're in an agile environment, especially if you're a security professional or a release management professional where you're not involved on the day-to-day development activities, might be overwhelming. So starting from that point, they use language that developers understand, and it's something that developers can consume. It's something that the security folks can start to help inform the activities, so you're not creating security debt in your delivery pipeline. And then obviously, the codification of the needs, the validation that things are actually being done using static code analysis tools and dynamic code analysis tools or dynamic security scans, and even doing some penetration testing. When you collaborate, when you bring the security professionals that have that expertise and can articulate what those findings are to a developer and work with the developer to identify those things that are false positives or really things that have to be addressed, now, again, you're creating the cycle of communication and collaboration. And we found, again, starting with the lexicon, the common understanding, things that we're doing with some of our customers at DHS is really helping break down some of those barriers.
So one thing that also we hear a lot when we're visiting with clients, and Dominic, I'll go to you on this one. So when do you think it's right to take the process and map it to a type of tool that's available, a technology, versus take a technology and map it to the process? Because I think there's benefits to both, and I'd be interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, so I think one of the things we found with our clients is they tend to own all the tools already, right? I've had that expression told to me. And so it's really about effectively using some of the tools they have in place. And one thing we try to emphasize is, how do you take your current processes and adapt them for a world in which things happen more rapidly? Because that's kind of the goal. Everyone talks about the ultimate goal of being like Amazon and doing 20,000 deployments a day, and it's hard to see how to get there when your current processes, maybe you have a change review board that reads once a month, for example. And so one of the things we've started to say is, if you have a requirement in your process, how do we automate that requirement? So if I'm in operations and I need to see what's being deployed, well, how do we use a tool to produce that manifest of what you're going to receive? If I'm a developer and I want to get started, how do I configure my workstation so I can begin work on a project? Where do I go for software to configure the tools that I need? And is there a repository for that? And so a lot of this is evolving, looking at what's in place, and then determining, okay, what is the first need we want to take down? And that might be onboarding new teams. And so when a new team wants to configure their workstation, where do they get Eclipse from? Where do they get the jars from they're going to work with? Where do they check in their source code? Can they use source code from someone else? And so those things start to tease out tool requirements, and then you can walk through some of the things that may be in place already, or evaluate 2 or 3 of the vendors that are out there, or open source tools that might allow you to get started much more easily. And so I think you're right, it's not so much about bringing tools to the party as eliciting the new functionality or the new speed of process that the client wants to achieve, and then determining how to get there using existing tools or evaluating the market space of tools that are there.
Yeah, and I think anytime we're talking about processes, we have to talk somewhat about metrics, right, and measurements. Because I think for us to all understand whether some of the implementations we're doing around concepts for DevOps are paying dividends, we have to understand what the metrics are that we're using. So, Rick, what's been your thought on what are some good metrics? I mean, for instance, we've had some customers that are really tracking, speed to actual deployment, the amount of people that are actually able to access these projects versus individually siloed. So
from a DevOps perspective, I think the main one would be like mean time to resolve an issue, because everyone in the panel members talked about experimenting, being innovative, but you have to have the ability to roll back to a particular point in time where you have working software. So it allows these people to feel like they can take chances, take risks, learn, and implement something. If it doesn't work out the way you want it to roll back. So I think mean time to resolve would be a huge metric to track.
Okay. Diana, Jen, any thoughts you've seen inside your agencies? Just types of things you're tracking?
Right, so we are looking at the amount of time that it takes to be able to get to the business value in the hands of the customer. I mean, again, that's how I started this, by saying that the mission, being able to meet that, but being able to realize that there's a business value that we need to get out there earlier. And so we do have various ways that we get customer satisfaction internally because we release internal applications for our employees as well as for the public. There are surveys also as far as the business value there. And just seeing the number of defects. So one of the things that we're doing is, and this goes with the DevOps environment, is shifting to the left as far as without testing, and so having that testing up front earlier. And so we're able to see if, as we go through the process, we should see less of an issue as we go forward because we're shifting to the left.
Anyone else?
At CBP, one of the things that we're doing is working very closely with the DHS DevOps IPT, and we're very excited about that. And a lot of Keith's people from Blackstone are helping us with that. And we are working to define various metrics so that way, whenever a component or even just a team starts off on their journey down the DevOps path and they are at day one and there's no automation, nothing in place, we're working to define what those metrics are across the board from day one to understand how we do automated testing and what your code coverage looks like and how often you do deploys. So you're very obvious metrics, and then trying to put in different metrics everywhere in between that so that way we can track what those metrics are from the start to the finish until we are doing full deployments into production, which may not happen. We're the federal government, but we're going to try really hard, and we're just putting in those metrics. And I really hope that out of our IPT we're able to publish and present some of the information that we're putting together, because it's very exciting. And we do have a 2-page list of metrics that we have put together.
Yeah, I know some of the projects that I've participated in with our teams, just sitting down and interviewing developers, security and accreditation teams, operations teams, and documenting, all right, in today's model, how do you do this, this, and this? And then really documenting how that could change in the form of a pilot or prototype is profound. And I think when you start to see things like the $3.1 billion modernization, which really is a working capital fund, and I'm not sure how it works, so if any of the govies in here can get me afterwards, that would be interesting. But I think that's important, right? Being able to document how you used to do something, how you could now do it by implementing some of these practices, and then what that return would be very, very effective. So we had the automation panel on here prior to DevOps, which is apropos. So from the types of technologies you're seeing that are having a real impact in the DevOps movement, maybe we'll start with Dominic, and if anyone else wants to comment.
Yeah, I would say one of the things that we like about a DevOps approach is the level of visibility you start to get into what goes on in your IT organization, and the level of visibility you see toward how things are moving through the system. And so an example technology that I've been asked about will be, well, how do we even keep track of what components we're using in our system? What software components are we deploying? And so you start to see technologies like an artifact manager that says, which versions of Log4j are we using? And is it vulnerable? And are we using the most recent one? And DevOps gives you a place to have a technology that exposes that. Jenn talked about Git and making it visible for everybody, and so I've been many places where they say, we want to promote code sharing. Well, now with a technology like Git, I can measure the number of forks that have been done and the number of pull requests, and I get metrics that help produce that value that I'm looking for. So that Git technology that they've switched to really, I think, gives that capability. Another technology I see is a way to allow development and operations to satisfy their itch for things. So operations might say, I want to control servers. So the idea that developers are creating and destroying servers at a rapid rate, oh my gosh, I can't allow that. And yet developers would say, well, I need that. I need the fast feedback. And so do you look at a container technology where operations manage the servers, the resources that host containers, and then developers deploy containers at will? And so now you have that split where there's a technology in place, like OpenShift, like some of the other Kubernetes type platforms, that let you get the best of both worlds. And so I love that idea that I still have a place for operations to maintain and secure a bunch of servers, and I let developers deploy containers when they need to. And so that technology brings that together. And so those are some examples I've seen.
Yeah. Any other members of the panel want to comment?
So I want to expand on the container side. Certainly the advantages around the operational control, the visibility certainly exist, but what becomes possible when you start to decouple your architecture and you start to allow teams to be a bit more autonomous. Obviously, you still need trust in the system, and you have to ensure that the things that they are doing don't break the system, as was described earlier. But when you start to break apart the architecture and you use containers and loosely coupled services or microservices, you now can really accelerate what each team can do. They're not dependent on one another. So the ability to get releases out based on what each team needs to do and what they're working on is now completely autonomous and decoupled from everything else. And the ability to achieve kind of the advancements that we're talking about and the maturity models that we're building within some of our customer environments, that's that kind of nirvana that we know about today. Obviously, things will evolve and there will be another one, and we'll continue to march towards that. But that's an area that I'm really excited about.
Can I add on to that, Keith? I went to a workshop that Red Hat presented for OpenShift, and it was the quintessential DevOps teams. There were developers and operations people in there, and you can see the sysadmins were at the beginning because it was all about languages and deployments and applications, et cetera. And they were very excited, but the sysadmins were like, okay, what's in it for me? Until you mentioned that if there is an upstream change, let's say it's a CVE that's issued and the underlying image layer is changed, you can have OpenShift automatically deploy that new image container automatically through your infrastructure, through your pipeline, all the way in production if you automate it that way, thus relieving all the sysadmins from going and corralling all the cats and saying who's using this version of X. It's automatically done for you, it's visible, which again, it's all part of DevOps, is making things visible to all groups so that all can contribute and so that all can improve.
Great. So we've got 4 minutes left, and I do want everyone to be able to answer this question because I think it's one of the biggest takeaways the audience could probably have. So just having been involved in DevOps projects now for quite some time, key lessons learned, and one thing you think they could do to get started. Because again, it's all about momentum in my opinion, especially on these very vague topics like DevOps. So lessons learned, and how would you recommend people get started in this stuff?
Yeah, so I think we heard before when you asked for a definition of DevOps, and you got 6 different answers here. And so I think acknowledging that in your environment you have people at different levels of maturity and different paces and ability to adopt DevOps as fast as they can. So I love what Diana talked about in terms of the boot camps, the ability to really broaden and make it available for a large group of people. If you just listen to your kind of your 1%ers in your organization, they're going to tell you how they want to do DevOps. And you're going to miss the mark of understanding how do I get all of my project teams with an ability to participate. And so I think that focus on adoption early is something that we've seen as a key lesson.
Okay.
So I don't want to repeat anything that folks have already said, but one of the things that we like to focus on, we talked a bit about it around the education, but each one of us plays a significant and really important role, and I think we have to understand that role in the value stream, the delivery of capabilities to our customers. And there are things that each one of us can do today, right now. Take a look at what you do. Understand those points of friction and find a way to eliminate those. If you can automate them, great. If you are in a role where you don't have the influence that Diana has or the control over the investments or the budget, try and find a way where you are right here, right now, and try and change what you're in control of.
I would say find the people in your organization who are innovators, who want to see the government move forward and change for the better. So find those people and raise them up and get them into positions where they can help. I've been very fortunate to have my management support me in doing that, and I consider myself a change agent and an innovator, and I have done what I can to find other people in my organization who wants to be forward thinking and innovating as well. So I would say that's the biggest lesson learned, and I think will help with culture too, because we become evangelists for what the future will be.
You definitely need your leadership on board with you before you go forward, or you have to have someone to be able to help you move through this web. But one of the main things I think you have to realize, especially in federal agencies, and I don't think we're alone in this, we have a lot of legacy code out there that we still have to be in perfect harmony with as we start to modernize. We're not going to, snap our fingers and tomorrow we're all modernized. So we have to figure out how, while we're modernizing, we're connecting to our legacy as well. We're going to be focusing on using more microservices and so forth. We have to realize that legacy has a lot of technical debt of how we did things in the past and how we can start to chip away from that. And so I do want to mention that when I talked about that boot camp, not only did we send our new hires, but sent existing employees too, because first of all, we want to give them the opportunity to learn it as well. Secondly, like as I say all the time, they know where the body bodies are buried. They know why we did what we did and why we did it, and it's not documented. So it's about engaging the existing personnel and bringing them into the picture as well.
And I only have 49 seconds, but I'd like to piggyback on what Jen said before. But I would augment that team of innovators with some of the curmudgeons, some of the ones that are stuck in the mud, so that they're brought along with you, so that you can address their complaints while you're doing it, so that you can show wins along the way. But start small with a small application, small pilot program, and prove yourself as this is a better way to approach things, or put your developers on call and they'll get religion real fast.
And my 2 tidbits, and then I'll get off the stage so the FedScoop people don't get mad at me. First one is focus on the value, right? The mission value, the business value, the user value, whatever you want. And I think that's why the metrics and documenting how you do things now versus how you do things in the future is paramount. And the other thing is, no matter what it is, talking with people who have done it before is very beneficial. So these events for me are always a great opportunity to talk to some of the teams and people on the panels. You know, don't try and recreate the wheel. If they've done it, go talk to them, pull them aside, and keep some momentum going post Symposium. So thanks to the panel. Give them a quick round of applause here.